Just so it comes down a hair.
You need Kevin here.
I think it'll work. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode. We're here with none other than the famous Baldwin. Liz, welcome to Bozeman.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Welcome.
first guest ever
Yep.
on the Locals Only podcast, the unofficial name.
Yep.
So, where do we want to start with this?
Since I'm not a local.
Liz, would you just introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Tim's mom. And
I love it.
Say no more. Say less. We've got all we need.
And we're done, folks.
Thank you.
Tim is my oldest son. I have another son, David, and two daughters, Katie and Becky. We grew up in New York. I started in New York City, moved to Millbrook, New York eventually, where I raised all my kids on a dairy farm. And they have all, except for David, since moved here to moved to Montana. Becky's way up north in Big Sandy. And Katie and Tim are in Bozeman, and David's in New York. And I am currently in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Go Vols. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay,
Dollywood, Dollyland,
Dolly.
What does that mean? I'm not familiar
Dolly
with that.
Parton.
Oh, that's where she's from.
Very
Knoxville.
famous.
She's from Knoxville?
She is the queen of Knoxville.
Okay.
Okay, this is my first question. Try to how to get some in. What could you tell us it was like growing up in New York City as a kid or a young adult?
Uh,
Paint us that picture if you could.
Well, I left New York City when I was 15. So because I was never a city person, but remember this was the 60s. I was, from 58 to 73 was when I was in New York City. So it was a completely different thing than what New York City is currently. But my parents also had a home outside of the city, what we called the country. And that's where I loved to spend my weekends and summers and things. And I was never a city person, much to my mother's dismay. And as early as I can remember, for whatever reason, I wanted to be a farmer. But 15, I left. I went to boarding school in Massachusetts and then college in Massachusetts. And then worked at various different dairy farms, Maryland, upstate New York, and then got hired by my future husband.
Wasn't there Wisconsin?
Wisconsin was there, yeah.
Wait, and where was the second home in the city or the
Oh,
country?
Tuxedo Park, New York.
Okay, so it's still in the city
Where is that?
technically.
No, it's not in the city. It's, I guess, Rockland or Orange County. It was about an hour outside of the city.
Okay.
And I guess, it's like nowadays you hear people, they go out to the Hamptons and do whatever, and it's kind of a fancy, ritzy thing to do. But I guess back then it was just, I don't know, seemed perfectly normal to us.
Sure.
Well,
So you said a couple things. You said that, it sounds like you said like New York City's changed. Yeah, I think that makes sense. But in what sense do you think the city has changed compared to when you were growing up there?
Well, I mean, as a child, I mean, it's big.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big place as a child, but now it's big as an adult. To me, it's big.
Yeah.
It's not. But to me, being allowed for the first time to cross the street by myself was
That
was
was
a
a big
big
deal,
deal.
sure.
We had one snow day. It was a big deal. Seeing the mayor. I mean, one time they closed Madison Avenue and we were roller skating down Madison Avenue and I tripped. I look up and there's the mayor of New York City picking me up. I was like, whoa, that's cool.
Wow.
So in that way it was smaller, more kind of familiar, but
Which borough did you live in?
I lived in Manhattan,
Okay.
64th Street between Lexington and 3rd.
Wow. It's like doesn't get much more downtown than that.
And I never used the subway. I never, I guess I was on a school bus through maybe first grade or something, but it was always the buses,
Mm-hmm.
transportation. Never took the subway for whatever reason. I was too afraid. Walked a lot, but I just never, the shopping, the stores, all that stuff was just not for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is there a story about you getting your bike stolen that I recall.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, a friend of mine and I, my dad worked in the city, so he drove from Tuxedo in the summer. He would drive from Tuxedo into the city to work. So he took a friend of mine and I because she wanted to buy a bicycle, and he worked at Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital, which is on 113th Street in Harlem, which that was again territory that I didn't venture to as a kid. Anyway, we bought
Was
this.
was Harlem dangerous at the time, or it was just too far as a kid?
I was a little white girl,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
this
there you
was
go.
this was
Yep.
they were all blacks, and
Sure.
you just didn't go there. Um,
You had to go there.
I know,
I'm just kidding.
but anyway, so we bought this
Different world.
bicycle, and I said to her, uh, "You get on the bus, and I'll ride the bike." Because we had to go back up to 105th Street, wherever it was, to meet my dad. So she gets off the bus, takes the bicycle, and we aren't half a block. And this guy comes over and he says, "Give me your bike or I'm going to stab you." And I mean, we basically just gave it to him.
Sure. Yeah.
Because again, we're, what, 12, 13. My dad was so mad.
Yeah.
Why'd you give it to them? Well, he was mad that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
he didn't even know we were buying a bicycle. So
What what did your parents do?
my father was a doctor, he was a pediatrician, practicing pediatrician for many years. By the time I was born, he was more in administration. He was the dean of the New York Medical College, and which then expanded out into Westchester. So he became the dean of the whole deal. My mother was a housewife,
Okay.
And you
but
guys,
she was secretary to Nelson Rockefeller for a while before she was married.
Oh, wow, interesting. Okay.
She was very proud of that.
you guys lived in a pretty cool house in the city, right?
We did. We had a 5-story brownstone, had an elevator. It was, and it's so funny now because to look at it, it was so narrow. I mean, it is narrow. As a kid, it
It
was a
seemed big.
castle,
Yeah.
and it was great. I could always have friends. There was always plenty of room for everybody, and parties, and just knowing your way around the city, but having a place to stay there was fun. See, weird now because there's no place to stay. Who's going to get a hotel room in New York City?
What do you mean by that?
Hotels?
Like so
Just to always have a house there.
yeah.
My parents died in, let's see, it was, my dad died in 79. My mom not too long after that, and then we sold the house
Okay.
in the 80s. So, going back to New York just was different.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I took my kids to show them the house, I didn't even recognize that they'd changed it so much.
Hmm.
I think I like very vaguely remember walking by it, but
I think I pointed to the wrong house.
yeah, so it's a very vague memory. So break down the sibling age scenario of the five of y'all.
Well, I'm the youngest. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. My oldest brother, yikes, I don't know their
No,
ages.
yeah, you don't have to be perfect, but roughly.
I think, uh, well, let's see, there were 6 of us, so we were basically 2 years apart, except there's a 4-year gap between me and my other brother. So he would be 14 years older than me, my oldest brother, and then 2 years apart. It goes boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And for whatever reason, there was a gap between me and my brother.
4 years.
My other, yeah.
So Frank is the oldest.
No, Terry's the
Terry's
oldest.
the oldest.
And
He's in
he's in
California.
lives in California.
Is he in San Francisco?
No, he's in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And he's married, been married forever, and has 2 kids, and they each have a kid, and they all live in San Francisco, Los Angeles. But for years, they lived in uh, in Massachusetts. So when I was going to boarding school, he was director of admissions of a boarding school that my sister Sally went to, and he showed me around all the boarding schools, and consequently, I went to a boarding school. But he moved out to California probably in 1980 or so. Just lived there.
Okay, then.
And then I have another sister who decided to make herself anonymous. She ran away from home, whatever, when she was She was 20, I was 15 or 16, less. Uh,
So she would be or would have been the second oldest.
yes.
Okay.
So there's Terry, is the oldest, and then Ann, and then Breck, my brother Breck lives in Massachusetts, and he's married and has an adopted son who's married and has two kids. Um, he is a really smart, really rich guy. And sometimes I don't really know what they do.
Shout out to Uncle Brack.
Yes.
Want to throw any money this way? We're here.
Um, his passion is sailing. He always had boats. He no longer has any boats. And then there's Frank, who moved to,
Wait,
oh no,
so
Sally.
Sally, okay, yeah.
So Sally was married in Idaho in 1976, July 4th, 1976. And we all went to the wedding, and Frank got in a car after the wedding and drove to Fairbanks, Alaska, and he's been there ever since.
So Sally, that's when Sally got married to Dan.
Yes.
Okay.
So their place in Idaho belonged to Dan and his mother. Have owned this. It was a little ranch with a couple really rustic old cabins,
Where in Idaho?
Driggs. And actually, just this past year, they sold it.
Hmm.
So he had it for years. His mother died years ago, but they've kept it. They, you know, got plumbing in it, electricity, all, nice stuff. But they really didn't spend much time there anymore. So they just sold it just recently. But Frank is still in Fairbanks, and he owns a restaurant. So he and his wife own a restaurant out there, and they've had very successful restaurant for,
Long
well,
time.
that, yeah.
I was just doing the math. So 76 to 2023. So Sally and Dan have been together for 47 years.
Mhm.
It's a long time.
So nobody's
At
in New York City.
David.
Well,
Nobody's
No,
from
no,
here.
no,
nobody's
mine.
from
No,
here.
no, no. But yeah, at Katie's wedding, they had um, a dance.
Yeah, what do they call that when they do like the how long they've been together,
Yeah.
right? The couples will
Yeah, yeah,
dance. I don't
And
know.
so, if it, 5 years, and then you leave the dance
yeah.
floor,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it was really a proud moment for me because my oldest brother's there with his wife. The last five couples is my brother and my old Terry and his wife, Sally and Dan, EP and Uncle, which is Tim's dad's um, sister and wife, and
Husband. Yeah.
husband, and Breck and Jean. So the five, and they're all out there, and it turned out that Tim's
Yeah, my aunt and
aunt and
uncle
uncle,
were.
it was like
Yeah, they
50.
were like 54 years or 55 years or something insane. Everyone's Becky's hysterically crying. Everyone's like,
But it's like
it was more emotional than the whole wedding ceremony.
it's nice to see that
Hmm.
people stay together.
Hmm.
And so many people in my family. It was just a thing. It's they weren't staying together for the kids. They
Yeah,
were
yeah,
all
yeah,
they weren't just they. So it was nice.
yeah.
Okay. So now that's your family. You're in boarding school now in,
In boarding school in Southborough, Massachusetts.
How old are you?
Uh, 15. I think I graduated. I was 17. So graduated from high school. Then I went to Syracuse University of all places.
Can I pause you there?
Sure.
If I'm tracking correctly, right about that time is when your sister left.
No, she had left way before that.
so you were younger then.
I was way young.
Okay.
I hadn't gone to boarding school.
Okay,
I was still living in the city.
so are you in contact with her now?
No,
Okay,
no,
so you haven't been in contact with her
no.
since she
I
left.
spent a long time. I was on a mission for a long part of my life to try to find her,
Hmm.
but never did. So when I left,
Is she in contact with anybody else?
no, nobody. We have no idea if she's alive. We have no idea if she.
Do you
No,
do you guys know or remember if you like had any drug use issues or mental
there
health
were
issues or
lots of all of the above.
okay.
And she actually was. She was institutionalized, and I was actually, for whatever reason, I was in my parents' room when a phone call came that she'd like run through a plate glass door trying to escape from the place. Just hundreds of stitches up and down both arms. She used to, as she was my favorite sister, you know, because, but she, oh man, she scared me. She, some really scary things happened, but yeah, she finally one day, she I think she called my dad and said, I'm gone. That
What
was,
what did that do to like the family dynamic and to your parents?
uh, you know, they stuck together. They stuck through it.
Yeah.
I know that like my Frank, he and I were the only ones that were home at the time, that lived at home, and
Hmm.
she was at home at the time. And, you know, just weird things like, you know, she was on drugs and, you know, it was the 60s. There were hallucinogens and she was
Hmm.
just in with the wrong people and she was sort of artsy and there would always be like weird paintings around,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, just, um, but still she was so nice to me. You know, she's my big sister. She'd
Sure.
take me places and do stuff. But, you know, my parents were really broken up, but they did the best they could
Sure.
to,
Keep
you
going.
know, try to find her.
Hmm.
And then they, you know, yeah, they just, you know, you keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Okay, so before we get to leaving New York City, what's your
right.
favorite memory you have of the city, or just as a kid growing up in the city, besides wanting to leave it and be a farmer?
Probably, well, I always enjoyed, you know, when my parents would have company over because I was the one that got to like meet them downstairs, put them in the elevator, give them the whole tour. You know, as just a little squirt, but I get to show off all the rooms and be like the big fancy tour guide.
Hmm.
And then being able to bring my own friends to the city and, you know, it's like I have this great place you all can stay and then I'll know how to get around the block. And,
Yeah, yeah.
but Central Park was, I loved Central Park and I loved we actually had a backyard, big wall. I'd spend hours throwing the ball against the wall.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's funny because I did that a lot as a kid. I so I don't know if you know this, but you're gonna now. I have like a set, at least a set of four. I think I took them when I was organizing everything at the farm, but I have a set of four whiskey glasses. I think were your father's or your
mhm.
parents. And every time I drink out of those, which is rarely, but sometimes I'll drink milk out of them more often. But I'm always thinking these are pretty gangster. I bet there's some crazy history in these glasses of just like your folks' friends sitting
There
around New
were
York City.
some incredible parties, yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So I'm thinking, oh, this I have these in Montana now.
And it's so like I went recently went to a high school reunion, and a friend said, "I just remember we had this card table in the corner of the living room, and my parents, my brothers Terry, Breck, they all loved to play bridge." And there was this like game table with this big green felt thing and they all smoked and there was one of the big light over it, so she goes, I just remember, you know, I'd look over there and they'd all be all the big cloud of smoke and all the glasses and they'd you know, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. You
Sounds so sick.
know?
Did would you consider your family kind of growing up middle class, upper middle class? What would you think?
Certainly now I would, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And I mean, probably upper class, but I mean, they bought the a 5-story brownstone house they bought when I was born was $25,000.
hmm.
You know, you sell it now for 15 million.
Hmm.
So,
Sure.
you know, is $28,000 in, you know, and owning 2 homes, that's kind of upper
Sure.
class.
Sure.
But I don't, I don't know at the time.
Okay.
But
I I've
certainly my father was a professional. I mean, he was a doctor, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've thought that out here. I was like, man, rich kids have no idea they're rich kids. If you're really like, you would never know or think that as a kid, whether you're. I mean, maybe if you're really poor, you would know, but like, I just don't think kids think about that much. Like growing up, you either have what you have, but once you get older, maybe if you start comparing yourself to your friends,
But you hear a lot of poor kids say the same thing. We
what's it?
didn't know we were
Yeah.
poor.
You don't
Yeah,
know.
that's what I
Yeah.
mean. I
We
just
had no idea we were poor.
probably like until you get to I don't know, middle school or high school, then you start to like go to your friend's house and see what they have. And
I never felt like
But
I
even
never.
that though, like you don't have any, you really don't have any context of like oh your parents living paycheck to paycheck, or
yeah,
because there's plenty of people that live in a nice house in a nice neighborhood or not have nice cars, but they live paycheck to paycheck.
yeah, that's true.
We were never, better than other people. My
Sure, sure.
parents never, said, don't
Yeah,
associate,
yeah,
with the exception of don't go up to Harlem because you're going to get your bike stolen.
yeah. Right,
They didn't,
right.
we were never told that we were better,
Sure.
and don't bring those people over, that
Yeah.
none of that happened in our family.
Okay, so now you've moved out at 15 and you're in boarding school. I think if I recall correctly, I think there's a year, isn't there a yearbook that says like you want to be a farmer or something?
There is.
Okay.
It was, yeah. Like I said, ever since I can remember, I remember in Tuxedo, there was a boy who was working on a farm, on a dairy farm. I didn't even know there were farms around. And I just remember, I want to do that. I really want to do that. How did he get to do that? But anyway, yes, there's a page on my, somebody wrote in my yearbook, they called me farm girl. And I don't know, I guess you become what you're called. I don't know. But I went to,
Depending on what you're called. Yeah.
so I did,
Sometimes you
Yeah.
might not want to follow that motto.
That's right. Especially in school.
so anyway, went to Syracuse. I mean, basically because it was the only place I got into. And I guess I always just thought you go to college. My parents, it was just kind of a thing.
What did you study?
And at Syracuse,
Mhm.
I guess just, whatever you do pre.
Okay.
Um,
Did you graduate from
I
there?
I
got,
did not.
I got one thing
Got
I
it.
want to back you up before we get to college.
Okay.
Because when you said Syracuse, I thought Orange, and then I thought of the Mets. So what can you tell us about baseball growing up in the city?
I know my parents took me to a couple of Mets games.
Okay.
We were always Mets fans. We were also Rangers fans, so I had been to hockey games. We're also Knicks fans. And this I give all the credit to my brothers and my dad. They also watched a ton of golf, which I never got interested in. Um,
Did you play softball growing up?
I played softball at Southborough,
Okay.
for sure.
That's your boarding school?
That's the boarding school.
Okay.
Um, I did not play at Syracuse. Um,
I thought you had some. I thought there was some story I remember about like you leaving the Mets game and something happened. I thought it was like everyone was on TV or something happened, a big hit in the game or something, and you had like gone to get a like something to eat or go to the
oh,
bathroom.
that was when I was a kid.
Okay.
We went to a Mets game, and my dad gave me money. Gave me the 50 cents. You can go get a hot dog. And of course, it was the one run. It was home run. Somebody hits a home run, and it was a 1-0 game.
Yeah.
But
That's the kind of childhood trauma that you
Right.
never forget about.
do you remember going to the Mets game with Dad and Sarah?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah. I
that
remember that.
was
I remember a lot of them. Yeah.
yeah.
I remember specifically, and I said this, this is such a nerd. We went to a Pirates game, and I literally made a sign. Mets were playing the
Okay.
Pirates, and the sign said, "Let's go Mets, make the Pirates walk the plank." And I like,
That's fun.
I bring this poster board, like I don't know, but yeah, I
Yeah.
remember because I remember seeing Ken Griffey Jr. Remember the Braves because I remember getting Chipper Jones and Gary, what's his name?
Sheffield.
Gary Sheffield.
Hmm.
Yeah, Chipper and Andrew Jones.
Gary Sheffield come to the Mets, huh?
No, he was on the Braves, I think, or maybe it was the
He
Mets.
was on the Mets
Yeah, he
briefly.
was on the Braves too for a
Yeah,
little bit.
I think he was with the Braves when I saw him.
And then Gary Sheffield would do
Yeah, did you see what
the
I was doing?
Mavs.
What's his name?
That's
Wasn't he like Dwight Gooden's cousin or something, nephew?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I remember that game because everyone was there. I think like Sarah was there, Dad was there.
Yeah,
Was EP there too? There was
probably.
we had two. I remember that we had two different sections of
Yeah.
seats. But anyway, yeah, I do remember that.
But then we had a neighbor who had box seats, and he used to give us tickets, and I would take Tim, and we'd be like right on the dugout, and we'd go way early. We'd take the
yeah,
train in,
yeah,
and we'd go early and get balls, and
Yeah, autographs and
and
all
then
that
yeah.
stuff.
remember Benny Agbayani going
Yeah,
all the way into New York City to
yeah.
get
To
his
that to
autograph.
like the Mets Pro Shop.
Benny
He's Hawaiian. Shout out
Yeah,
to Hawaii.
that's right.
Okay, so
It was
you're
fun, but that was, all my brothers, they were all into sports, and all the New York teams went to. Um, Even my brother Breck took my mother to Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier fight.
what?
So that's interesting. Interesting. Wait, say that again.
Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier.
That was in New York City.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Madison Square Garden.
your family, who went to that?
My brother Breck took my mother,
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
and Frank has all kinds of stories of Howard Cosell meeting him. He's got a big autograph with him.
Well, from what I understand, that's like such a cultural thing to see Muhammad Ali because of like his stance on the war and everything. So like every like not just people that were fight fans, like everyone in the world and in America that didn't support the war, like stood up for him, and like it was like the whole country was coming together
Yeah,
when they would watch Muhammad Ali fight.
I'm sure my mother got very opinionated about it, but what
Okay,
what her opinion was, I it was
yeah,
over my head. I was still just being a stupid kid, I guess.
yeah. Kids are not stupid. Please take it back. Okay.
But when I was at Syracuse, so Syracuse, I go from a high school, a boarding school that's 60 people, the three grades was, 10 people in my class, to Syracuse University, which was 20,000 people. In the meantime, my father's got cancer and he's very sick, and he's at home with my mother. My mother's trying to take care of him and is overwhelmed. So I'm leaving Syracuse, driving every like Thursday to Tuesday to stay in New York to be with him. And Syracuse was like everything was, believe it or not, on on not online, but like recorded, so I could, these
Ah,
big lectures and stuff I could just listen to
on tape.
on tape. Yeah, but anyway, I did not like it. It was to me bigger than New York City. So I ended up, a friend of mine from high school was going to Hampshire College, which is in Amherst, Mass. And and I was able to bring my dog to um, Southborough, my high school. So for 3 years, I had my little poodle with me, my little poodle
In
Alfie,
class?
everywhere
That's pretty sick.
In high school?
in high school,
In boarding
in
school?
boarding school. So it was this tiny little girls' school. Like I said, there were 60 of us, and I had my dog, and then they were affiliated or associated or something with St. Mark's School, which is a big boys' school in St. Southborough, Mass. But anyway, so you could take classes over there, but I really didn't. And anyway, so I had my dog. I went to Syracuse. I couldn't bring him with me, which, just added to.
Hmm.
Anyway, so a friend of mine from high school told me she was going to Hampshire College, and she goes, "You should come here because you can bring your dog."
So hold on, I have to say something. I have to pause for a second. I thought this whole like bring your dog everywhere thing was like
I was the
some
original. I was the original.
some new age bullshit. And you're like, no man, I did this a long time ago.
I was the original,
Yeah, because
and I hate seeing all those dogs now. I
That's
really do.
so that's hypocritical. I love it.
It's true though. I hate seeing all those dogs.
Because can I? Because I would imagine now, like if some kid in high school is like, hey, I'm gonna bring my dog to class, be like, get the hell out of here. You know, like
No, they
no,
loved
you
him.
can't bring your dog here. But yeah,
what
okay.
year was this?
I graduated 76, so 73 to 76 that I was in boarding school.
Okay.
I had my dog. I went to Syracuse just for one semester, so that was from what, September to January.
Mhm.
Started at Hampshire in January. Got accepted, brought my dog. Um, and okay, so and then my dad did die when my first in the beginning when I
So
was at Hampshire.
he smoked his whole
He
life.
did.
Was it lung cancer that he had?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, how old was he?
He was 59.
Oh wow, so he's young.
Yeah. Um, so anyway, and then I graduated from Hampshire in 3 years. If Hampshire College is a very new age kind of place. They don't have grades. They don't have tests. You just
That
kind
was
of
then.
That's when I was there.
Oh wow.
You did these projects. Basically, you studied all fields of study, and then you focused onto one thing. And so, what I did at Hampshire, my final thesis was adopted children searching for their birth parents. And that all came about because I was always looking for my sister.
Hmm.
And somebody said, why don't you try to find out how these adopted people
Do it.
go about finding their birth parents? And that turned into the whole thesis basically that I wrote at Hampshire that I graduated on.
Okay.
So that was sociology. And in the meantime, I was going to go down to the Library of Congress to do research for this project. And I had no place to stay in Washington, D.C. So my parents said, well, we have some friends in Moncton, Maryland, which isn't too far from Washington, D.C., and you can stay with them because a lot of my brothers and sisters had spent time there. Turned out that it was a dairy farm. So
Oh
I
shit.
so I went there. I mean, I did travel to the Library of Congress a few times, but for the most part, I was like, wow, can you teach me how to milk cows?
Hmm.
And I went every spring break, I would go. You from college, you'd get January off, but yeah, I went there all the time. And then when I graduated, right after I graduated from Hampshire, I just went there. I worked for them, I think, for like 5 years, and then went to Wisconsin, another dairy farm,
Do
and
you
then
remember how big that the Maryland farm was?
yeah, there were
Okay, so if you worked for them for 5 years, you were like from 21, 22 to
from
27, 26, 27.
17, 20, 21, yeah, 21 to 24 probably.
Okay.
Because then I went to Wisconsin briefly, and then I went to a place in upstate New York, Fultonville, New York, and then so when
All on
I
dairy farms.
all on dairy farms.
So can I just, what size was the one in Maryland?
The one in Maryland was about 70 cows, and it was tie stall or it was stanchions
Uh-huh.
at first, and then they built a big milking parlor.
Okay.
So that was, and then they got to about 100 cows. Wisconsin was like 300 cows, and they milked 3 times a day.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was a whole different scenario, and it was just milking. In Maryland, it was that they taught me how to drive a tractor, bale the hay, do all fencing, all the things that are
Yes,
involved.
I guess it was very much more commercial in
Yes,
Wisconsin.
yeah. And then I went to a place in Fultonville. So there's a magazine, a pretty big magazine in the dairy world. It's called Hort's Dairyman.
Shout out to Horde's Dairyman.
Hort's Dairyman.
Uh,
I put an ad in Hort's Dairyman that I wanted a job. I,
Hmm.
and as I recall, 23 people answered my ad.
Wait,
And
can you give us your best memory of what your ad said?
yeah,
Like,
female looking for.
and I got 23,000 replies. Young female in her 20s looking for.
That's hilarious.
Dave Hammond always used to have a joke. He'd say, "Oh, female has a tractor, looking for employment on a farm," and the response is, "Okay, send picture of tractor."
That's such a farmer dad joke.
Yeah, it is.
Dave Hammond was a veterinarian on my
Okay.
family's farm for a long time. Anyway, sorry, continue.
So anyway, 23 people responded, and I chose this one up in Fultonville. But in the meantime, I wrote back to the other 22 people and said, "Thank you very much for."
So you're handwriting a letter to
Yeah.
every. That's
And I'm saying, "Thank you very much for, answer, but I'm taking this other job." So I took this other job up in Fultonville, and it was not gonna work out. And I was there, I don't know, 6, 8 months or whatever.
So you talked to these folks on the phone.
No, I think it was all handwritten. Maybe
I mean,
people called.
before you took the job.
I don't really remember. It
So
was probably on
why
the
do you think you
phone.
took that job versus the other 22?
Don't remember.
Okay. All right.
Honestly, I just don't remember. Um, and again, I, anyway, I have no idea.
Whatever.
I have no
Yeah, it
idea.
doesn't matter.
But anyway, but now since I had contacted the other 20 some odd people, now I wrote them all back again. I said, it didn't work at the other place. And so it turns out Tim's dad said, "Oh, okay, well then try us again."
Hmm.
So the rest is history.
Did you put those beers somewhere?
They're in the drawer on the door of the garage fridge.
Sorry, continue.
That's all right.
Well, so
But
like I
so,
don't know
have you
that.
ever seen the New York Times ads? I got my job through the New York Times.
No.
It was a big famous slogan
Okay.
because there used to be a huge classified. You never see classified sections in newspapers anymore,
Well,
but it used to be a
actually,
thing.
I just tore some up and put them in the fireplace. But that's we're talking Bozeman. Um,
Classified ads.
yeah. Okay. So you're saying that
But the New York Times used to have a big
and
thing.
throw some wood on
I
the fire.
found my job through the New York Times. I always say I found my husband through the New York through Hort's Dairy.
That's um. Well, you were going to get into that.
Wait.
You'd said that the rest is history, but that in many ways that's kind of where the story begins.
Oh, absolutely. No, I
Um,
wrote. Yeah,
so how old were you when you moved
I was
to Millbrook?
24.
Millbrook, you were
I was
24.
24.
So you very short period of time in Wisconsin, very short period of time on this other farm.
Hmm.
Really within a year, you had bounced
Pretty
around.
much.
Yeah, and so at 24 years old, oh, it's coming, Tim. It's coming out of your headphones. I'm hearing it.
Oh, what is it?
Um,
He's hearing himself.
Terrible. Poor guy's listening to himself.
so at 24 years old, I would imagine that you're like trying to figure things out. So like, whatever that means at 24 versus
Exactly.
whatever age, but
And I still have my dog.
you still have your dog. Okay, so
I'm still
What?
toting
Wait,
my
like
wait,
dog
at
around.
wait.
what are your so but you're go ahead.
What's the dog's name?
Alfie.
Shout out to Alfie. Continue.
So at this point, your father had just passed away a few years
My
earlier.
father died when I was at Hampshire.
Yep. So 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
So your father had passed away, and so like what's your mom think of this right now? Like you're bouncing around from farm to farm. You're from New York City. Like is she okay with it? Is she not okay with it? Do you think she's judgmental?
She's not real thrilled with the whole farm thing.
Hmm.
Um, she,
Because
they're,
she
they're
doesn't understand.
struggling.
Because she doesn't understand it.
I'm not sure if she doesn't understand it, or I mean, maybe she feels responsible because she's the one that told me to go stay with her friends on the dairy farm, which was what changed everything. I have no idea,
Hmm.
but and then she thinks the farmer's taking advantage of me. Oh, marry the help. You know, how do you
Hmm.
keep the help? And
Uh-huh.
she didn't see any future in it.
Hmm.
Any, you know, you're never going to get rich.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
in her mind, stupid farmers.
Sure.
But
Well, that's what I meant. Like she doesn't understand it. She doesn't understand the lifestyle because maybe she wasn't exposed to it.
right. But I will say when she met Tim's dad, she really liked him, and she really liked his mother. So
Okay.
she was she was pretty cool with it after that.
Okay. Got it.
But I never did. My mother liked New York City. My mother wanted the debutante kind of thing. My mother wanted me to marry, into, you know, dresses and theater and show business and stuff, not
What's the word
farming.
debutante mean?
Coming out, I think.
Okay.
Wait, so I still don't understand what it means.
Well, like you put yourself out there at a certain age. Women do so that they can find a you know it's like arranged marriages kind of things.
Mm.
With it's a society thing. Back then in New York City, there was the social register. And if you had your name in the social register, and then you got invited to these debutante things.
Okay, let's talk
Oh,
about that. This
interesting.
is really interesting. Can we go down this rabbit hole?
We can, but I got to tell you, I know my sister Ann went through the whole thing. I remember going and peeking through windows at her big balls, the dances. I don't know a lot about it because I didn't do it.
Okay, but let's talk about what you do know about it,
Okay.
because this is fascinating to me. Okay, so
Think of English royalty.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is like a upper class society thing where
At least
where
wannabe.
sure, and so where people are trying to
Have nots.
they're trying to meet each other, and so they're doing this through these social
Well, their
gatherings,
parents are trying to
right?
get their offspring.
To say like lawyers from this part of town meet other lawyers' kids from this part of town, whatever. Is that sound about right?
Like, yeah, I don't know if it was a like occupational kind of thing as much as, again, if you're in the social register, if you live on Park Avenue, if
Mm,
you, I mean, I went to dancing school, we had the little white gloves, the little dresses,
mhm.
but that was when
That's where I get it from.
that was in fifth grade.
Uh,
Um,
your boy's got some moves, in case anyone was wondering.
that's really interesting. Okay, I mean, it totally makes sense.
And it was something that I totally was not
Yeah, you're like, I'm not into
interested
this.
in
Yeah,
at all. And she liked theaters, museums, cultured. She wanted me
yeah,
to be cultured.
yeah.
And I,
She wanted you to go to the opera and
yeah,
go to ballets and
and I just,
stuff like that,
but I will
plays.
tell you, at late hours of the night, back then TVs were pretty little, like that size.
Yeah,
And
13
I
inch.
could watch any movie that came on, and of course they were all black and white. She'd know everybody. And like Clark Gable would be like a waiter, he's like doesn't even have a lead role. She knew everybody. It was amazing.
Because she was paying attention to that kind of stuff.
I guess so.
Interesting.
Okay, so I thought when I was putting wood in the fire and was disconnected, um, I was thinking. So you said you met your husband on Hort's Dairyman. So I'm just wondering how much money Farmers Only owes you right now,
Yeah, right.
because you're essentially the original, the OG Farmers Only.
Well, like I said, back then, classified ads, you did, even Horse Area now, you won't find it anymore. You'll find one number, there'll be like a whatever, warehouse kind of, some bunny that will match you up, but you just don't see that anymore. But now online dating, all that stuff is, it's huge.
Yeah, that was the one thing I didn't hear. I should just listen back, but I'm curious. So the job didn't work out in Fultonville, and then so you reached out to Dad
Yeah.
and just said,
I
"Hey,
Like that
reached
was
out
the
to everybody,
okay,
all the ones that I had said that I was going to take
thanks,
to.
but no thanks.
And he was, I think, the only one that actually wrote back
hmm
and said, yeah. And I know that my mother took the phone call when he called, and I was like down in North Carolina or something, and said, somebody called and wants you up in Millbrook, so I get in my car and I drive up there. It was, I mean, and Dave Hammond was there with
yeah."
him when
Let's hear that story because I remember hearing this.
So let me just get this straight. So you were in North Carolina.
yeah, it was just because I was unemployed,
Yeah, okay. So you're in North Carolina doing whatever, and your mom gets a call from Bill
right?
and writes down all the information
Yeah,
like we
because she
used to,
was
right?
Nelson Rockefeller's secretary.
Yeah.
She took copious notes. She
So
was
she
there.
writes down the address, Bill, and you look it up in the Thomas Guide.
The what?
Um,
Ward's Dairyman?
no, no, no. Like you
Thomas.
had to like get a map to figure out where it was, and, like
Oh,
drive there and have directions. And so
no,
like,
I'm sure I talked to him. I'm sure I talked to him. And, he said, come at such and such a time.
yeah,
And
And it would have been fairly easy. I had like directions if you take the Parkway up, right?
probably, but I probably didn't know the park. I mean,
hmm
do you guys know what a Thomas Guide is?
no.
No,
Interesting. Okay,
educate us.
you can look it up later, but
Oh, all right. Don't
well,
educate us.
no, it's
Up on the board.
no. So a Thomas Guide,
Pull
like
that
an
up,
and
Jaden.
a Thomas Guide is basically a really thick book of a maps of a certain region. So if you wanted to say there would be a map of the entire Gallatin Valley,
hmm
and it's all split up in this book. And so it would be is you'd open up the first map, and all of Gallatin Valley is on there. It's split up in a grid, 1 through 30, A through Z.
Okay, so
So
then you go
then,
to like,
so then you go, oh, I want to go here.
Chase
So
that.
it's like, okay, it's in Bozeman. So then you go, okay, cool. Where's Bozeman, and then you go, okay, it's 20th Avenue. So you go, then you find 20th right in the back, and it tells you, oh, 20th is on page 4, 17, 32, 81. Then you go to 4, 17, 32, and 81, and you find your other cross street. Then you have to flip between two different pages to find like where you're actually going and
interesting.
cross reference them. But so they just give you different perspectives on a map,
Yeah.
and then you find out where you're going. So that's how I grew up driving all over LA. We didn't have GPS, So we would have a Thomas guide of LA in the underneath the seat of the truck, and you'd pull it out and you'd be like, "Fuck, where am I going?"
No, I don't. I'm sure I had directions, but
Okay.
But you love your maps now when you
I do love
travel.
my maps. Love maps.
I do too. So
Always had maps. Yeah, real maps. And we always had maps up on my doors. And
uh, what? Okay, so explain the day when you showed up at the farm with
so
Dave
I showed
Hammond.
up at the farm, and of course, I don't know where to go or what to do, but there's a barn. So I open the door and I wait, or I open the door and there's this guy standing there, who I assume is Bill. I
Hmm.
say, "Are you Bill?" And he's no, but Bill will be here in a little bit.
Hmm.
And it turned out that was Dave Hammond. He was the vet. So Bill shows up, and then they kind of just did their thing, and Dave decided right then and there, this is a keeper, 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 keeper.
Hmm.
So
Okay, so how old are you then?
I was
24.
24.
How old
So
was Dave at that time, roughly?
Who?
Dave.
Dave Hammond?
Yeah, how old does you think he was at that time?
Gosh,
he's gonna be 40, right? Is he dad's age? Was he younger, older than dad? Because dad's gonna be 44 if you're 24. Is that
he's gonna be 42.
42?
Yeah, but I don't
Gangster.
know if Dave was a little older. I have no idea.
Okay, but they're roughly the same age.
Yes.
Okay.
But so, I mean, I have no idea, I'm kind of auditioning. It's not like
Yeah.
come show up to work because I have no place to stay. I have no place to.
Ah.
Anyway, so he invites me up for dinner or lunch. He lives with his mom. Bill lives with his mom.
You're like red flag number one.
Bill lives with his mom on the farm.
Yeah,
Okay.
on the main farm. And there's this older guy named Ike who's been there for forever. And it turns out that that's really the reason Bill's hiring somebody anyway, because he's an alcoholic and he's kind of a binge drinker. So he'll go totally off the rails for anywhere from a day to 6 months.
He's like Tim.
Oh wow, that hurts.
Shout out
Wow,
to
that.
Tim.
Oh.
But anyway, he was Ike worked for Bill's dad. Bill took over the farm when his dad died, and he was only 18. He really knew nothing about farming, but he knew enough to know that his mom was going to lose the farm if he didn't step in. And Ike was the only one that knew anything about anything. So he
So
completely relied on Ike. But then it got to the point where he can't rely on Ike anymore
well, that's 20
because,
years later, right? So him and Ike worked together for 20 years. If you're saying Bill took over the farm at 18
yes,
and Ike was still there at 42,
right, yes. Oh,
so
absolutely.
20 something years later,
Absolutely.
Ike's still
And
around.
Ike, in the early days, he did a lot of the milking, all
Yeah.
the field work.
So Bill relied on Ike in the early days for a lot.
And then it got to the point he didn't want to milk anymore, and he, wanted to drink more. And Bill clearly needed.
Shout out to Ike.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will shout out to Ike later. I'll tell you another great thing. But so anyway, he was more of a guide. I mean, drunk, Ike knew more about farming than I'll ever know.
Okay.
But anyway, they were like mentors. And so um, anyway, so he hired me, and he told me later he was terrified. He didn't want to hire a girl,
Hmm.
but Dave talked him
Shout out
into
to dad. Common sense here.
David Dave Hammond talked him into it. But so anyway, so I'd been there, I don't know, a couple months or what have you, and um, so Ike and I are sitting out at the end of the barn drinking beers together, and Ike says to me, that Billy, he's really got a thing for you. And
Hmm.
I was like, really? I didn't know that. He goes, oh yeah, he's really got a thing for you. And I said, that's that's cool. That's good
Okay.
to know. And then he goes, but he'd never have a drinking woman. He wouldn't want a drinking woman.
Mm.
And I said, really? I said, well then, let's do this.
So Bill didn't drink at all.
sometimes he'd have a beer with me after, like we'd be unloading hay.
One
But
beer.
for
He'd
the
have
most,
one beer.
yeah, but for the most part, no, not really. And at the time I was living, I took a room with one of his mother's friends, just 3 or 4 houses down, just a room, and I was, paying $20 a week to live in this room. But anyway, so I said to Ike, I said, well, then why don't we just stop drinking? Let's just quit drinking right now. And he goes, okay. So we both took our beer and we just threw it. And and I said, all right, there we go. And I went home and I didn't drink again for 27 years. Ike was still drinking in the morning.
Okay, he drank the next day.
But all because, Billy didn't want to drink in woman. I wasn't going to work out very well if I was drinking. So
Hmm.
Is that your shout out to Ike?
that's my shout out to Ike.
Can you explain the name of the farm and the correlation with
Yes.
Ike?
Ike Ike was Ike Horton. His mother was Eleanor.
Bill's.
He was Bill's mother is Eleanor, and he's Baldwin. So it's Ton Elwin, Horton Eleanor. So it's Ike Horton Eleanor Wynn Baldwin, and
So,
that's all because you have to have a name to register your cows. So he came up. He put the three names together.
Okay.
so that makes Ton one farm.
Yeah.
And after, so Ike died, his mother died, and obviously Bill died. But
In which, so Ike died before.
well, so Ike died basically right after we got married, which we figured it was almost like, it's like I have no place here anymore.
Mm.
It was almost like he was heartbroken. As much as he wanted it, he was kind of heartbroken. But
What did he die of?
I'm not really sure. It was really weird. He was over at Sharon Hospital, and we had been visiting him. And one day we walk in, and it's like he's not there anymore. It's like
When did you get married? How old were you?
26.
Okay, so 24, 26. You got married at 26. Um, and when did this conversation about, that I brought up that Bill has something, he's interested in you.
Like I said, a couple months after I'd been there.
And okay, interesting.
How do you know how long did you guys actually date before you got married?
Well, it was I think pretty much 2 years to the day.
Okay.
But again, I just everything's so untraditional. It's like it's like we decide to get married, and then I like call people. I was like, you gonna be around in 2 weeks? Because if it was like in 2 weeks we're gonna get married. We
Hmm.
had Peter
So it's
Bailey's
not like you had a long
wife.
plan. You were like 6 months or whatever.
Yeah. But interestingly, he went. We bought an engagement ring, and it was an emerald with two little tiny, tiny little diamonds on the sides. And that's how we took the ring and we showed it to his mother and told her we were going to get married. She was thrilled. And then we took it over to Ike. Now Ike lived in this sha- shack trailer. This, just beer cans
Yeah,
everywhere, and
it's a mess.
like just anyway. Showed him. He was like, he was drunk, but he was. Oh, that's great. It was pouring rain, and I used to park my car down by the barn. So then we went down to the barn. Anyway, pouring rain. Drove home. The next day, I look, and one of the diamonds is gone out of the ring. I was like, oh crap.
It fell out.
Yeah. And so I'm like looking all over Ike's trailer for this diamond,
Hmm.
and there's like sand and dirt
There's
and
shit
crap
everywhere.
all
Yeah.
over the place. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I go down to where I was parked, and it's all gravel. There's a big grain tank there. There's an old well. It's a dirt driveway, and all. I found the freaking diamond. It had been pouring rain. I still found this. And I said,
Hmm.
this is
That's crazy.
destiny. But anyway, so that was cool.
So you guys got married in Smithfield?
Smithfield
Yeah.
Church.
How did you, I mean, what was that? What was that like relationship like in the beginning? So how did that happen? How did you go from I'm an employee to, we're going to start, you
Well,
know, I guess, being with each other, right? Because you were renting
We were
a
with each other
room.
all the time anyway,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I was, no, I wasn't living in his house. We never lived together until, because actually he lived with his mother, so we built a house. Because I said, I love your mother. I want to keep it that way. I don't want to live with her.
yeah.
So we built a house and it was ready to move into after we got married.
Okay, so you built a house while you were engaged.
Yes.
Yeah.
We decided to get married, decided to build a house,
Okay.
and did all that. And yeah, we moved, we got married, went to Puerto Rico, which was a big deal for him. He'd never been away from the farm.
See, that's where your honeymoon was.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then came back to the house.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. What if you were to describe Bill, I mean, to somebody who doesn't know him, didn't know him, what kind of a guy was he? What was his personality like? Like, what did, the feeling that he gave
Hmm.
you? Who was Bill?
Well, when I first started working there, so I had spent the 5 years in Maryland and, was always getting good, you know, good, not recommendations, but, people spoke highly of the work I did
Mhm.
because I loved what I did. So
You did a
you
good
know,
job at it.
and, learned well quickly and was safe and good with other people. And, anyway, um, and then I went out to Wisconsin and, same thing, it wasn't my work ethic. I just didn't want 300 cows.
Sure.
And Fultonville was just, the people were just a little bit too. But anyway, I go down and start working for Bill, and I remember calling my mother saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this job
Okay.
because, he's got such high standards.
There's a bunch of Coors Lights in there too. Yeah.
Do you like? I don't know if you do you like any of these? Pale ale? Would you drink that?
Yeah, sure, that's cool. Um, because everything had to be in a certain place, and everything had to be.
He was
He
meticulous.
was very meticulous. Everything was
He was an organized guy.
very organized. Um, he still really relied on Ike. And
At that point, 20 years later.
Ike was one of these people that was like, he had incredible like instincts. You know, he, you know, he used to just sit at the end of the barn. There was this big door and he would just sit there. He always had a beer in his hand, there was always a big pile of cans over.
And
But
I want to be a farmer, man.
we'd pull a wagon of hay in, and he'd just say, "It's too heavy. The bales are too heavy. It's too wet." He didn't even feel it. He didn't. He knew. He just knew it. It's gonna rain. You better. He just had a
He had really
call
good
instinct.
instincts.
But
So meaning we're not going to unload that hay right now,
well,
or
no, we
it's
would
going to
unload.
rain
He
and
was
we got to
just
do something
giving us
else.
shit for having bailed it. Why'd you bail it, you
Oh,
idiots?
okay,
you know.
okay, all right.
But so Bill was always trying to live up to his standards because he was always, we were never really quite good enough for Ike, no matter what we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but we did try. But he was very good mechanic. He could do he could fix everything, and he was very good with the cows. So he taught me how to do all the milking, and trusted me to do all the milking. But there'd be stuff like within the
This is Ike
first
you're talking of, or Dad?
no dad
Yeah.
within the first week, like he'd go up to his house for lunch, and so at this point I'm still smoking and drinking, right? I used to smoke
Gangsters.
too. So I would, speaking of smoking, I can tell you that story too. But anyway,
Smoking.
we'd go up to his
Cliff note.
mother's house and have lunch, and then he would always want to take a nap after lunch. So I would go down. There was this little pond. I would go down to this little pond, and I would have my cigarette, and then I would go back up to the barn, and I would.
He's 42. You're 24. He can go all day. He's like, man, I got to take a nap.
It was actually just the opposite. But anyway, because I'm
Gangster
trying to
Dad.
burn it at both ends, right? I'm trying to.
Mhm.
Anyway, but I would go up to the barn and I would like, set the milk tank up and do all the, kinds of things that had to be set up. And then he'd come down and he'd go, "Oh, go get the milk room ready." Did that. Oh, well then go do, oh, I did that. So he
During
would
his nap.
love that I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, so, I was always trying to, he was always trying to make me better. He was everything always, and he took great care of the cows. He knew a lot about, how to feed them. He would teach me how to feed them. And then he taught me,
Do you want
Unplug
to
it.
unplug those?
Unplug that one.
Can you shake the cord just so I can see which one it is? Or you pull on it.
Got it?
Ever still have headphones?
Yeah.
no, I can't hear.
You can't. Can you hear now?
Back on.
Pull it again. Okay, let's try this one. Still here?
I got it.
I can hear.
Yeah. I was hearing an echo through.
Okay, yeah. That's smart.
Anyway, so
Can you?
he was great. And he cared about everything, the house, and, he always wanted to make me happy, which was awesome. And,
What do you mean by that? Like, what would you do to make you happy?
you know, I was just, say nice things to me.
Okay.
You
He
know,
was just a nice guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very nice, and he would, you know, i- when you do something well, you get credit for it. And,
What would somebody like? What was Bill like? To
and
just to like.
his mother was still alive. So his mother was alive she died after my first son was born. Um, and then she died right after that. But anyway, he was very devoted to his mother. And so and his sister. His sister lived up the street, up the road, and he was always a very caring, you know, s- generous. Wanted to provide for everybody and make sure everybody was taken care of.
Mhm.
Can you? I guess. I guess to the best of your memory, can you describe what the situation that he was put in when his father passed away, and like what obstacles he had to come over just to keep the farm from? I think he was 18, right?
He was
Roughly.
18, and he was really never involved in the farm.
Yeah.
So his grandfather, I mean, this is all kind of second, third
Yeah.
hand.
To the best of
His
your.
his grandfather bought the farm, and his grandfather was a mean, nasty old guy, and um, but he bought the farm, and then his son, who's Bill's dad, worked it with him, and so Bill's mom and dad had the farm, and then his grandfather had this little like log cabin and a big moonshine thing, and he was nasty. He drank a lot, and he was a nasty guy. And I guess one day when
And it was a dairy farm then.
it was a dairy farm,
So like, would that have been like the turn of the century?
um, I guess I'm not great with
Okay.
dates, but at any
Well,
rate,
I'm just thinking like if it's Bill's father, so Bill minus 20 years, right, and then call it minus 20 years, and then his father minus 20 years. It would be
yeah,
somewhere around
Roughly, yeah.
around the turn of the century.
roughly,
His
Okay.
dad, I think dad was born in 40.
I think so.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
1940.
But so he's married. No, Bill's dad is married, and they're living on the farm and they're working the farm, and he's 40 years old. His dad is 40 some odd years old, and his father gets drunk and gets mad and whacks his own son over the head with like a 2x4.
Hmm.
And Bill's dad is just never right from then on.
Okay.
And he's he's functioning. He's still running the farm, but he's just not right. And Ike is pretty much doing stuff,
Hmm.
and his wife is taking care of him. And then he dies, like I think 10 years later.
Hmm.
And so Dad's 18 now.
So EP would have been Eleanor. We all called her EP, Eleanor Pitcher. She's older than dad,
Yeah,
right?
she's like 22, and she's married.
So how old's dad's 20? What are they, like 2 years apart, roughly?
I think they're 4 years apart.
Okay.
And Anyway, the farm was in shambles, and they owed money. They owed a lot of money
Like
on
from
it.
what I recall, like $100,000 in debt
I
roughly or
don't think
something.
it was that much, but
Okay.
it was enough,
Hmm.
that he knew that he was not going to. They would not be able to keep the farm. There's no way his mother could keep the farm and stay living in her house
Is it?
if he didn't do something.
I know this is kind of a guess based on what you know, but like, would do you think it's a fair to say that like the farm was in that status because of like just poor management,
Oh,
meaning between the
absolutely.
financials and just like inefficient
His dad's
business.
head just
Yeah,
wasn't there.
right.
He was, his dad loved like gardening, landscaping, stuff like
Mhm.
that, and he's like putting all his time into like rose bushes
Yeah,
instead of
instead
milking
of
the cows.
right.
And Ike's, and it's not like Ike is really trying to
Yeah, yeah.
do something. He's just kind of keeping it going. I mean, when I got there, even when there was stuff all over the place, But anyway, Dad knew that, so he ended up buying the farm from his mother, and he stayed in the house obviously, and you know made it into made it he could pay it off the thing, and he would never ever borrow money.
Hmm.
So at one point he wanted to put an extension on the barn, and he waited like 8 years till he had the cash that he needed to put that extension on. He would never. It was,
Hmm.
he always ingrained that in my head. And I think when I started working there, I was getting $75 a week, and I was renting the room down the road for $40. So I had $35 for my beer and cigarettes and gas for my car, which
What kind of car do you drive back
I
then?
had a Toyota Corolla.
Ooh,
It was awesome.
sick.
Shout out to Toyota.
$3,000 brand new
Yeah.
from 1976.
Well, when you're only pocketing $35 a week and you spend 25 of that on beer and cigarettes, you only got $10. You gotta save up a lot to get to
Yeah.
3,000.
Shout out to $10 a week. Anyway, I remember my first raise, I got up to 125. But
Sick.
at any rate, I mean, still, now I got the farm. So,
Wait, so we had a footnote in cigarettes. You had a story.
oh, so yeah, so Ike, we threw out the beer.
Uh-huh.
Then the very first Christmas we spent in the house for Christmas, I was sitting in front of a fireplace. I was smoking a cigarette, and I had a Christmas card for him to open up. And his Christmas present from me was that I would never smoke again.
Who's this? Bill or I?
To Bill. So I threw the cigarette in the fireplace as he was reading it. Never, never touched another cigarette.
Wow.
That's discipline.
It
Hmm.
was really amazing because for once you have like an actual reason. I mean, I used to say I can quit smoking anytime. I've done it a million times. But
Which, like, probably I would say, I would argue 90% of people that smoke cigarettes or use chewing tobacco say that I could quit, I just don't want to. And
Hmm.
I've said that so many times when I've quit.
it was weird. It was just like, you know what? Now there's a reason. So
And did he chew tobacco then?
he, I used to chew the red man too. He did, but he had quit too.
Mm.
So did he quit before when you quit cigarettes or before?
Yeah, I think you
So
know,
Bill probably didn't
and
drink.
he was never the one that said to me, don't drink. And he would say to me, I don't like it because I don't want you to get sick. But he never tried to tell me you know, so it was just, when you're giving it to somebody, you just
Bill probably didn't drink because of his father and his grandfather,
probably,
right?
yeah,
Sounds like they
yeah,
had a
yeah,
alcohol problem,
yeah. And Ike, yeah,
right?
yeah. But he was kind of he could be mean, but he was kind of a fun.
A fun drunk.
Shout out to Fun Drunk.
He was just, but I felt bad, because it was really, and my dog really did the same thing, poor Alfie, after all these years, he was 19 years old and he was like, dude, I'm not your number one anymore. So,
But your dog lived to 19. Shout out to Alfie.
It's two for Alfie.
yeah, he was awesome. He was
Wow.
awesome. Yeah. And we had his father for a while, but
Did Alfie like it on the farm?
oh, Alfie loved it on the farm.
Yeah.
But see, back in those days, you didn't have leashes. You
Hmm.
didn't have to, you know.
Yeah.
But, another thing, I used to beg my dad in New York City. He was like, you can't have a dog in New York City. So finally, I begged for years to have a dog. And then finally, one day, my dad goes, okay, you can have a dog. So my sister Sally and I spend, 3 days. Like, what kind of dog? I'm like, it's not for you, it's for me. But at any rate, so we decided on a sheepdog. So we go to my dad and say, okay, we've decided we want a sheepdog. He goes, nope, it's a poodle or nothing. Poodle? A poodle? Hey, who wants a poodle? And he's like, it's the only kind of dog you can have in the city. It's the only kind of dog that can adapt to the city. And I was like, poodle.
I guess I guess that does kind of make sense.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and they don't shed,
Yeah,
you know.
that's what I was gonna say.
But at any rate,
So he's like, it's better for the house.
and I was like, well, you know what? I want the dog. I didn't.
Yeah. So you got
So we got a poodle, and his name was Jasper. And I told you we had the backyard in the city, and so the backyard connected with another backyard, which connected
which was
with
probably very rare, right?
pretty much.
Yeah, to have a backyard in the city.
But there was a little tunnel between the thing, and there was a little female dog that lived over there. And they'd been trying to breed their dog, American Kennel Poodle, for years, and to no luck. And all of a sudden, their dog is going to have puppies.
Yeah.
So my dad wrote me a letter I was at summer camp, and said, "Well, you got another dog when you come home." That
Oh,
was Alfie.
okay.
So Jasper was really always the city dog. Alfie was always Alfie. Like just came with me everywhere.
Yeah.
Here's a question. So, if Dad didn't have kids till he was in his 40s with you, do you know if he ever like wanted kids, or what was he just like so busy
Well,
with the farm?
ironically, I didn't want kids
Okay.
because I used to babysit for kids all the time. I was like, they are such brats.
In New
To
York City.
No, actually, that in Tuxedo.
Okay.
Because my mother, being Rockefeller's secretary, she would take calls. She would field calls all the time. I was like the mountain mule of Tuxedo Park. They were calling me all the time. Can you come Tuesday at
Shout
3?
out to
Can
Mountain
you
Dew.
come, Wednesday? And my mother would write down all these things. You got to be here at 2 and you at 3. And,
She's putting you to work.
yeah, $1 an hour. Um, anyway, um, what were we talking
Kids.
about? Oh, yes.
Wanting.
So I didn't have kids, but anyway,
You didn't want kids until what age?
till Dad said he wanted them.
That's a great conversation to have
Until
with you.
Bill said he wanted.
He said he wanted them, and
Shout out to your kid that's sitting here.
yeah, exactly.
Which, if we remember how the podcast started, I'm Tim's mom.
Right.
But so I was absolutely, have kids with you, sure,
Mm.
What a
Why,
concept.
why would that change your mind?
because that's the way we were. If that's what you want, then
Hmm.
not a problem. Because anything I'd want, he would. That's just the way we were.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn cool.
Hmm.
So, did he want? Do you know if he wanted kids before then, or why didn't he?
I think. It's. He's a guy, but nobody came around.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pickings are slim in Millbrook.
Hmm.
I'm sure he wanted kids. He had Greg and Sue.
Uh-huh.
His niece and nephew were there, and he always, they worked around the farm. He loved them. And
Yeah. Okay, so you guys got married, and then you guys had fast. How soon you guys started having kids?
it was a little over a year.
Okay, so you have Riley a little over a year.
Yeah. And then Katie 2 years later, and then Riley died, and then you 2 years. Everybody was. It was still boy girl boy girl boy girl. 2 year 2 year 2 years
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
So, fun fact for our listeners: a lot like dairy farmers are very they're always breeding cattle, and they're always like knowing when the cows were bred, when the cows were going to be born. So I always think
Pay attention.
when farmers have kids, I'm always thinking, oh, how much do they think about did they check the breeding chart to figure out when they're going to have their next? So I think it's kind of ironic that we're all synchronistically 2 years apart.
When you
Like,
say breeding chart, what the hell is that?
well, because you'll track when a cow comes into heat because they're on a
Yep.
21-day heat cycle. So you just know,
Because
oh,
you're artificially inseminating
Yeah.
them,
So
so
you have
you
to pay
know
attention to it.
yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So you've bred this cow and you don't know if she conceived. So around 18 to 24 days, you're keeping an eye on her. So, she didn't come back into heat. Maybe she conceived, but you need to keep tracking them because if the cow goes too long without reproducing,
So
she's
you keep like a log.
There was
yeah.
only one time it could have been. You were actually breeding a cow. So if she's not pregnant for that one, you breed her again. But us humans, we don't just try once a
Right.
month.
Right.
So you never really know.
Yeah. So
That's right.
anyway, I just think, um, yeah. Well, I think of Jen and Jeff who work on their farm. They have two kids that they're 2 years apart, but they have the same birthday.
Oh wow.
So I just think to myself, oh, you weirdos, you guys have had kids on the same birthday. Did you completely time this because you know what you're doing? But anyway, okay. So now you have kids. Um, what's that like?
Oh, again, they thought I was a little bit crazy. I mean, I don't know. You know,
Who thought it was crazy?
well, for starters, dad's first of all, he's afraid of hiring a female in the first place. And
Mm-hmm.
then turns out to be me, turns out that that's kind of cool. The moment that Riley was put in my arms, I said, this kid is never getting on a school bus. I'm not, I'm not doing this.
Oh, this is gonna lead to a great conversation.
Now I have
How did that come about? Like, how did that just like
I just looked down at this baby. I said, there's no way I'm putting this kid on a school bus.
why?
I'm not letting him go. I'm not,
You wanted to be with him at all
I
times.
want to be with him at all times.
Okay.
So, I'm trying, I've graduated from college. It takes 2 years to get a teaching degree. If I have to go back to school, do whatever I have to do, I've got 4 years to figure this out. And within 6 months, I started hearing on the radio about homeschooling. And I'm like, what is this about? So I pick up, I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do. And Bill and his mother are like, you gonna do what? And Bill's like, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do, because I mean, literally, I didn't stop working. I'm still pulling my weight at the farm. I'm still milking the
You're like
cows.
8 months pregnant. Okay, cows.
Oh yeah. Well, not true with Riley. With Riley, because we didn't know. We had actually hired Will Brown.
Okay. Shout
So
out to Will Brown and Casey Brown, great friend of mine who just had a kid. Will Brown's his dad. Casey, I hope you're listening. I'm sure you will when we send you this.
we didn't know how much I could do being pregnant or whatever. So we had actually hired somebody for that. But after he was born, I went right back to,
Quickly
I'm
we went right
still
back to work.
milking. We're making it work. We've got this little car seat and a little cart in the barn, and we've got monitors for the house so they're asleep, and just, whatever. It's all just another part, another job,
Hmm.
another thing. And that happened with the first one, the second, the third, we just,
And I think from growing up on a farm and being so used to like cows and calves being born and newborns and everything, I think farmers when there's a kid born, they kind of like it's a little different, but they also treat it the same. Like, oh, it's just another like this. We got to take care of this one. This one needs
Hmm.
milk. Like we could put this one here while we do this, and it just turns into a system.
all
Yeah.
of my kids were overdue. And there would be
Oh.
times, like, I mean, I specifically remember one, and it was probably Tim because it was summer. He was born in July. And I was unloading hay. And I had like coveralls on because, I got this big old belly. And these people were biking up the road and they came in. They were like, can we look in the barn? Can we like see what's going on? Like, sure, go ahead. So the guy,
City people from the city.
probably, the guy goes into the barn, and he's, looking around doing
You're like,
whatever.
it's a fucking barn.
The woman is just standing there staring at me, and I'm like,
What's the
whatever.
deal? Yeah.
I'm just putting the hay up on the elevator, and she looks at me and she goes, "When are you due?" And I was like,
Weeks ago.
"About 6 days ago."
Hmm. Yeah.
But Dave Hammond, once again, he always used to talk about the women in the bean fields, they just lay down and have a baby, and then they get up and keep on picking the beans. It's like, okie dokie, that's what we'll do.
Shout out to old times. Oh.
When David was born, the milk tester, that's
David's
a
the
name.
youngest brother of
Yeah,
the four
David's.
Baldwin children.
So he's my fifth pregnancy. And the milk tester comes every month. And the milk tester he comes for the night milking, then again for the morning milking. And he's basically weighing how much milk each cow is giving. And Don, the milk tester, been coming for years, every month for years. And the morning of the milking, he would come to our house and we'd always have breakfast. Well, he did the final paperwork and gave us all the final numbers. It was just the way it always was.
Was his last name Ike?
Hewlett. His
Hewlett.
name was
Hewlett.
Ike,
Okay, so
but
Ike Hewlett.
his real name was Don, but yes,
Yeah.
Ike Hewlett.
He had that like a pipe he'd always
Pipe,
smoke. He
yeah,
had this pipe that he'd be smoking while we're milking the cow.
in
It
the barn.
smelled so good. You remember that? It
Yes,
smelled so good.
always. But anyway, so Ike has come and milked that night, and then we go home, and my water breaks, and I'm like, oh crap. Um,
Is that night?
that night, yeah.
This
Hmm.
is
I'm like,
David.
this is David. And I'm like, kid, you can't come now because the milk tester's coming in the morning. So I guess he listened because I get up in the morning and I'm milking and I'm telling dad because Kathy,
So your water breaks, you proceed to just milk in the morning.
yeah, because the milk tester's coming.
Explains a lot about David. We'll get into this later.
So Tim's cousins are living up in the tenant house and they've agreed to take care of the other kids whenever it happens that I have to go to the hospital. So dad's running around trying to make arrangements because it's obvious that this kid is coming quickly. And Ike is like, Don the milk tester, he's just doing his thing and I'm just milking the cows and dad's like frantically trying to get everything ready. I hang up the final milker and I looked at Don and I said, I'm really sorry, but I can't give you breakfast this morning. And he just looks at me and goes, what's up? I said, I got to go have this baby. And he just, the,
His facial
it's just,
reaction.
I went home, I took a shower, we went to the hospital. David was born before noon. And then Katie was mad because why did it take you so long to get home? I was home before 6 that night. We picked him up.
Not a shout out to Katie.
A shout out to Four Brothers.
Katie,
We picked
you're
up the
never
pizza.
getting on the podcast.
We got the pizza at Four Brothers for dinner. Got it home.
Yeah. What took you so long,
I know,
Mom?
exactly. And then
And
she
you're
was
like,
even mad
at
because,
that point, you're just like, I will kill you.
and in that short time, we changed his name from Daniel to David.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
There you go.
Hey, Daniel. Shout out to Daniel.
She called him
You
Daniel.
loser.
She
You
called
loser.
him Daniel for at least 10 days after because she was so upset.
Mhm.
Okay, so tell us about homeschooling.
Yeah, so I homeschooled all my kids. Um, let's see. Um, well, Riley never went to school. Katie went to school. I think she went in 10th grade, mostly because she wanted to run. She loved to run. So she wanted to be on the cross country team, which she did very well. So she started school in 10th grade. Tim never went to school. Shout out to Tim. Um, let's see. Becky went in maybe 7th grade, just because she was a toughie. And David,
What do you mean she was a toughie?
she was just tough. She had a hard time learning anything, so I had a hard time teaching anything. And it was very frustrating, and I really didn't want to always be screaming at her.
Hmm.
But,
So you're like, well, let's see how she does in school.
well, at that point, it was kind of like, you try. I can't do it. I've
Yeah,
tried
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
You do it.
Okay.
But, I mean, for the most part, they all grew up being farmers. It was like math was figure out the feed ration.
Hmm.
But with Tim, a lot of it was baseball. Tim, we got a lot of good schooling out of baseball
Sure, there's
because
a lot of
Oh,
numbers in
interesting.
baseball.
you would read books. He would read because it was Babe Ruth
Yeah,
or baseball stories or
yeah,
in statistics he would do the baseball statistics and uh, you'd write stories.
Hmm.
But anyway, baseball was easy with him. Um, but you know, it was just teaching him how to work, how to cook, how to do the books, how to write checks, just life stuff
yeah.
you
Hmm.
need to learn. And it was funny. One day we were building a new silo, and there was a cow calving, and there was all this stuff going on. And I said to Katie, now she's going to school at the time, and the only reason she's going to school is because she wants to do sports, she wants to do softball, she wants to do all the things. And I said, Katie, can you please, stay home because the cow's calving, and I've got to go deal with these other guys. If you can deal with the cow calving, she goes, okay. I said, I'll take you later. So I drive her to school at like 10 o'clock. And they said, well, she was late to school, so she can't play in the game today. She can't play
Hmm.
in the softball game this afternoon. I'm like, you're kidding. She's helping me. She had to stay home to help me. The cow's calving, we need stuff done. Nope, school rules, you can't. I'm like, so you're teaching this child that it's more important to, like, if I had given her a note
Sure,
that said she'd gone to a doctor,
it would have been
if I
fine.
had lied, they literally said, next time just bring a doctor's note or, make a note that you went
Hmm.
to the doctor.
I'm like, what's the
So
difference?
you're teaching me to tell her to lie instead of like doing something to help your family and even the softball coach, I mean, like everybody's like to this principal, are you crazy? Anyway,
Hmm.
they didn't let her play.
Hmm.
But that was anyway, so that's school.
No shout out to that dickhead.
Right. But anyway, so
What's your thoughts on schooling now?
well, COVID really messed everything up. But again, I was way ahead of the curve. It's like shout out to me.
Shout out to farmers only and homeschool.
Homeschooling, raw milk, I'm telling you.
Here's
Uh,
my This is my thought in hindsight of being homeschooled, which I'm honestly eternally grateful for and wouldn't trade for anything. But my only thing is that I think is, man, I wish I had like better social skills because when I got older, it took me a while to feel comfortable socially.
but the funny thing is when I was homeschooling, the whole point was who do we want socializing our kids? Other kids. I mean, this is the thing. Am
Yeah.
I going to send you to second grade so you can be socialized by these stupid kids
Hmm.
or stay home where, you've got EP, you've got me, you've got dad, you've got Mike, you got, it's like, but
So that's the one thing I'll say I'm the most grateful for. And somebody said this to me, Danny, mutual friend of ours. He said this to me, I don't know, last summer, 2 summers ago. He said, if there's one thing we know about you, Tim, and he said this to almost to sound as an insult, but I took it as a huge compliment. He said, if there's one thing we know about you, Tim, is you are not influenced by the opinions of other people. Because, this is like, you should do this, you should do that. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's because growing up, I didn't have a million. I wasn't trying to fit in with everybody. So I
Hmm.
really think that helped me be able to think for myself.
and the funniest thing about you was
Besides my face.
because I mean, I did try to socialize them. There was 4-H, there was Little League,
Uh-huh.
and I coached all of their teams. But as shy as Tim was, he would never look at anybody. But he thrived as a relief pitcher.
Hmm.
And he would, if and
Dun,
when
dun,
a
dun, dun.
coach noticed his skill, they would put him in, and he just like it was all on him. The game it's on you, and he would just kill it. It
I
was
wonder
Good
why
job,
amazing.
Tim.
thanks. I wonder why that is. I wonder, like, was I just naturally shy?
I don't know, but I remember Winston.
Uh-huh.
He was one of the first people that you would ever actually look at and
Uh-huh.
talk to. For whatever
Huh.
reason, you just happened to. He was cool for you.
Huh. Well, he's a carpenter. Remember I wanted to be a carpenter when I was
Yes.
a kid?
Remember the other carpenter?
Who? Oh, Billy. Right?
Yeah, the Christian guy
Yeah,
that you.
wasn't it Wade? Something?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
wasn't it Bill
yeah,
Wade or Billy Wade?
something like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
I made
it was
some
just
cool stuff then.
you did. You made that box,
Yeah,
that
the show box, the
showbox.
banana, remember the banana hanger,
Hmm.
paper towel holder.
Banana hanger.
Yeah, it was literally like a an arc with a hook on it, a little, and you just hang your
Yeah,
bananas on them.
sure.
Yeah,
Everybody has a banana
yeah.
hammock.
Yeah.
In my fun fact for our listeners, in my house I live now, I just have a underneath my cabinet. I just have a hook, and I just hang my bananas. Yeah, so they're chilling,
Right.
like fresh off the trees.
Bathroom break time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bathroom right there.
Oh boy.
What are we? An hour and a half?
Yeah,
Just let's see what
David
we got.
told me it was 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Dave's an idiot.
15 minutes for what?
Wait, what did he tell you?
He told me there was a 15 minutes of fame.
15 minutes of fame. Oh, you go forever. Kyle, where are you headed?
I'm gonna go get some.
I can't carry this by myself. You gotta wait till she comes back.
Okay.
Come on, man. Can't have everyone separate at the same time. This is insane.
Good call.
Yeah.
Good call.
Got any other questions I should bring up for Mrs. B while she's on the spot?
Um. Yeah. I mean, any questions that you've never asked before that you should ask?
I can't think of it. I'm having so much fun. I don't know about you.
I'm having a great
Yeah,
time.
this is fascinating. Yeah, what else? What else? Homeschool. Isn't that so interesting? See, I don't even remember that. I do remember being like kind of shy. Just not, I don't know. I have no idea why. Is that genetic? 'Cause I guess it'd be genetic.
I don't know about genetic.
I mean, or something I'm just born with. Why would you
Not
be?
necessarily,
Yeah.
right? Like if
Mhm.
your environment is small, right? So you spent all your time around a handful of people. You're comfortable around those people. When you get outside of that group, maybe you weren't that comfortable. So it's like you're not comfortable with your baseball team when you first meet them, and
Yeah.
maybe let's just say at the beginning of the season, because you're like, I don't know these kids. I don't know their dads. I don't know their moms.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
like, I would imagine you got more comfortable as the season would go by.
Yeah. I had
But if you grew up in New York City, right, and there's all these random people around, it would always be random people, and you would therefore be comfortable with random people.
I had a gal ask me this morning, said random girl whose name I won't mention. She said, does anyone else in your family talk more than you?
Mm.
And this was meant to be taken as an insult. It was taken as a compliment. I'm just good at talking, so I figure why stop. But the irony of my mother saying I won't look into anyone's eyes or
Mm.
talk to anyone is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can Liz? Can you explain that?
What?
Explain why your perception of like why you think Tim was um, shy as a kid. So you'd said that like he wouldn't look at people in the eye. Was that? I'm assuming it's people outside of his normal circle, right? So when was that? Give an example of that.
That he wouldn't look people in the eye?
Yeah.
And lean in closer to the mic if you don't mind.
Oh. Uh, I know that none of my kids, ever wanted other people to hold them. Like, they came everywhere with me. Wherever we went, but, if somebody else said, "Oh, can I hold the baby?" They'd scream their freaking heads off.
Hmm.
But, so it wasn't really just him, but he was almost painfully shy. I don't know why in particular, but none of them really. But they did, like I said. Well, Katie, for example, right near us was the Millbrook Hunt, and the woman that took all the dogs out knew that Katie was homeschooled and knew that she had time on a weekday, on a morning weekday, and asked if she'd like to come out with the walking hounds. So she would go out with this older woman and walk, and then there'd be other adults. There were lots of adults by, and so she was interacting with more people. Tim didn't really do that. I mean, I don't know why he was so painfully shy. I have no idea.
I mean, I would imagine that their life, like homeschooled, living on a farm, their social circle was pretty small, and up until a certain age, then you break out. They start playing little
Yeah,
league or
we
whatever.
didn't do play dates. We didn't
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
Now their cousins lived on the farm, and even that, I was like, there's no reason. I mean, against tr- tradition or whatever, it's like there's no reason to have a sleepover. You know what? You could go over, play, and then you come home to your own home. But those kids were there, and then but not as 2 year olds. Just I mean I don't know. It just
Yeah, I mean, I definitely never spent any time in anybody's house as a 2-year-old. I mean, I would say we would start having sleepovers. I was probably like, God, 8, 9.
yeah. But my grandkids are going to daycare at 6 months old. They're in
Sure, but they're not sleeping over. They're
no,
going to
but
daycare during the
they're
day when Katie and Rich are at work.
yeah. But I mean that's my kids never had any of that.
Yeah. Hmm.
Everything was now when Bill's mother was alive. Um, she adored Riley. She'd take him every second. But after that, there was no backup.
Yep.
And Eleanor was working,
Was there
so
even an option for you to take the kids to daycare? I think there was one in
I
town.
have no. I'm sure there was. I know there is now. Whether there
Hmm.
was then, I have no idea. But it was certainly never even date. I mean, I was looking beyond daycare. I was like,
So, do you think that because the kids have like I guess normal or most kids have so much social exposure that had something to do with it? That's just as kids, or no?
you know, did something just happen?
No, you're
No,
good.
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know if it was me. I mean, having lost Riley, if I was holding you closer, I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Well, how do you think Lila and Rowdy are with Katie? Because it seems like if Lila's ever crying, the second Katie touches her, she's like quiet.
It was funny this morning. Katie's holding Lila, and I come in and I take Lila from her. And Lila is, I mean, she rarely cries.
And she's very good.
She's great. And then Rich is sitting there and he goes, "Hi, Bean." She just bursts into tears. I was like, I had to turn her away from him. But anyway, I don't know who knows what.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe this is just my thought, but before Katie had kids, I never pictured Katie as a mom. I just wondered if she ever even wanted kids.
But I think it was the same. She was coming from the same place as I was. She used to babysit all the time,
Yeah.
and it's
She
like,
seems like she was like us, like
yeah,
enough with the kids. But she's like, what I've noticed in observation is she's like the sweetest mom I've ever seen in my life.
she's very patient.
The way the kids look at her and the way she looks at them and the way they act with each other, like it warms my heart.
Yeah, no, she's yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but and it's yeah. I mean, having homeschooled you guys, it's hard seeing not hard, but daycare's a whole different story.
Okay, so if we said I was painfully shy, we could probably both agree that David's painfully social
Yes, very much.
is overcompensated.
Because he never wanted to farm. I mean, I could never keep him, it was like he would get his academics done by 9 o'clock in the morning, and then he would just want to sit and watch TV.
Yeah,
It's like, you guys, I could never get you to do your academics.
yeah,
You'd always come over to the barn and want to do stuff. But, I used to say he'd break out in a sweat if you said the word work.
yeah.
And
I
I'd rather just,
because I just think of like he hated me growing up, but I always was trying to get him to help me, and he would never help me do anything. It was so painful.
he never wanted to work. But he loved very social. Yep.
Yeah,
And where that, I mean, I don't know where that,
but that's what Uncle used to say about Dad. He's like, when Dad didn't farm, like before he did anything on the farm, he was like, he had this nice car, and he was always like smooth with the ladies, and like was a totally different person.
yeah.
But I never, when I was younger, I still didn't want to farm that much. Like, I felt like I felt responsible to do it when I got older.
Um,
Because I specifically remember this day vividly because it was when Jen and Jim were working at the farm, and Jim said to me, "Do you want to run this farm when you get older?" And I said, "No, I want to play baseball." It's like that's literally what I said to him. Like that was
mhm.
just straight up my answer.
I always used to say that you wanted to be a baseball player,
Yeah,
which is fine by me.
yeah, it would have been fine by me too.
I used to feel bad because, I mean, again, Dad was so particular about how stuff was done, and I would let you guys do stuff,
Look at this guy.
and it wasn't done just perfectly. And I was like, I'm not gonna tell them that. I would just go do it again.
What would we not do right that he wouldn't want to tell
You
us?
know, you throw down the wrong bales of hay, or you wouldn't fluff the beds quite right.
What would he do? Make me carry the bales back up in the hay mound?
No, he'd make me carry it.
But you could appreciate. But I always thought that I felt like you were very hard on us. But like in hindsight, I appreciate it now. And I think you've said that. Like you just always wanted us to do good.
Well, I know David always says that to me. He says, "You always never good enough for you." I was like, "Well, never really should be. You should always want to do a little better." But
Yeah, I think shout out to Dan Heacock. Um, you always tell people that they've done a B job, no matter how good a job they've done. It's like you just tell them they've done a B, and then we'll always strive to do something better. And then, you know, I don't know. I think that's kind of a somewhat of a healthy way to
you have to do
tell
that
people,
when
like, yeah,
you're
you
right.
did a really good job. You just, it's like, yeah, you did a B, maybe a B plus.
Yeah,
You
I'm.
got some work to do.
I'll get completely in the weeds. Like go down this rabbit hole, but just briefly, I listened to a Andrew Huberman podcast about this, and he says that it's so much better to tell people, "Good, you're working really hard. This is really good." You should never tell someone, "Oh, you're so talented." But if you say, "Hey, you're working really hard and your hard work's paying off," that encourages people to keep working hard, which will make them better. But if you tell them, "Oh, you're just so good at this," but they didn't, it totally changes the way they
Yeah,
can. So anyway, that's a whole. There's a 2 hour podcast on it, but a neuroscientist. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to butcher it, but just throwing it in there.
I mean, really, don't really mean anything by it, but just a different change the wording makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, at this point in my life, there's not many challenges that I feel like overly intimidated by. Like everything I'm like, if I do this long enough, I can figure it out. And like most things, I feel like I can fix. And like I accredit so much of that to how I grew up and all the challenges I was faced with and able to overcome. And I'm very much appreciative of it.
Well, sometimes I'm totally amazed when I realize that when your dad died, 7, 9, 11, and 13. I'm with 4 kids, 7, 9, 11, and 13. I'm like, oh, and a farm.
Yeah.
You were 11.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, David says he doesn't really remember dad that much.
Yeah.
Um, but it's amazing to me that, and it's like, I mean, sometimes to me, I was just like, I mean, you just gotta
Keep
keep
on.
doing. And
Hmm.
I look back and like, wow, he got pretty amazing kids.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's why I look back and think the same thing.
So,
What do you attribute that to?
I mean, you just got to keep going. You
Keep
know,
working.
just got to keep going. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean,
You don't have much of a choice.
exactly. I'm not going to, give in. Do the best you can. I always used to say that, it's like, you'd like getting hay in. It's a lot of work to get, a 10-acre field in, and you do the best you can. You've got all kinds of experience. You know how to work the fields. You know how to do everything. But you mow it. You ted it. You rake it again, and then it rains, and it ruins the hay, and you're like, what the hell?
I let this
Mm.
grow for half a year. I like planted this last fall, and it's the
Yeah,
middle of summer, and it's just coming into cut. And
but you made a decision, you made a decision to mow it when you mowed it. And
Hmm.
you've just got to, like, you know what? You just got to, move on to the next thing. So, you know, you got this,
So
now you've
if it
got
were
a
to
new,
rain, depending on how much it rained, like the product is completely ruined.
pretty much.
So you've wasted 6 months.
Well, not 6 months, but
Oh,
you've wasted
well,
a lot of
okay,
time and a lot of money and a
three or
lot of
4 months.
energy. Yeah. And then you still got to bale up the crappy hay. But at any rate, I guess all I was trying to say was, you know, you just, I always just figured you gotta just do the best you can.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do the best you can.
Think you guys are ready to wrap this up?
Should we? Are we ready?
I don't know. It's totally up to you guys. That's either a good point to end or we can keep going. It doesn't matter to me.
Hmm.
I'm ready to wrap up. I can come
Okay.
back. I can come back
Okay.
again next year.
Okay.
All right, Mom. I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. I am just overly impressed with who you are as a person and the kids you've raised and what you've accomplished despite everything you've been through. And like you have four happy, healthy kids and beautiful grandkids. And I admire you and look up to you for.
I'd be remiss to not say shout out to Kevin. He did it all.
Shout out to Kevin.
He'd say it was him. Kevin. He likes to say he revolutionized everything I ever did in my life.
Oh, is
That's
that?
Liz's boyfriend.
But they can't.
Yeah.
And what do you tell him?
Shut the fuck up.
Oh,
That's
I
awesome.
gotta do this now because this is just making me think of it. So ready? Have I ever explained?
Did you hear what your mom just said? By the way,
Shut the fuck up.
no. Before that,
What?
I would be remiss.
Yeah, that's what Andrew Huberman says.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so do
But
you?
anyway, thank you very much for
Yeah.
asking me and you know,
Okay, so do you? I've never told you
don't
what
get all
this.
teared up or anything.
I've never told you what this about this tattoo, have I?
Which one, the treads or
Yeah,
the?
the
Oh, you haven't.
windrows. So
Oh, okay,
these are windrows of hay.
okay.
And I'm always reluctant to who I'll tell about this, but now I'm telling it in a podcast that we're going to post publicly. So with your permission, of course. Okay, so there's three windrows of hay.
Right.
Okay, so one windrow is for Riley, one windrow is for Dad, and one windrow is for EP. And the meaning of this in my head, this is how I thought of it, is on a farm, you always have to like the cycle of life and death.
Hmm.
So life, like death creates life, life creates death. Like you kill all this hay, you take the field out of the hay, you kill it, but you feed it to the cows. The cows grow, they breed, they eat, give birth to new calves. So the concept is of this is the life that's been given, Dad's life, Riley's life, EP's life, but everything that life has produced, it's given birth to new life, to me, to my siblings, who now the grandkids. So that's the concept of my tattoo. Just thought I'd share that.
Did you
So
know that?
yeah,
I did not
so
know that, but
that's the windrows of hay. And that's like this is my favorite tattoo by far.
that's excellent. That's
Anyway,
awesome.
yeah, it's my favorite tattoo. So tattoos are a whole nother subject, but that
Sure.
one's very special to
So
me.
it goes along with the theme. You just, you know what, you
Yeah,
through
that I
death you bring new life. You keep going. You know.
yeah, and then like that to the like something has to be laid down and given for something else to continue, and they literally laid down their lives. And anyway, I'm just proud to call you my mom
Nice.
and very grateful.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Kyle,
Thanks, Liz.
Kyle, you got any final words?
I really appreciate you sharing this with us, and I learned a lot about you. And thanks for sitting and spending some time with us.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank you.
folks. Until next time, we'll see you.
See ya.
Bye.